Hi everyone, I'm Corey Joe Humphries or ECJ, and this is Commander class. This is going to be class 2 where we shall talk about where your deck goes and all the cards that you use random places. Most people use a playmat because the playmat keeps your cards safe, because decks can go somewhere between a few hundred to a few grand. So it's nice to keep them sleeved. So if you don't know about sleeves, it's kind of to protect your cards because some cards are worth a lot of money. And then the mat is to put on a table, so you are able to put your cards down so they are completely safe. So on this episode we'll be talking about where you put your cards on the playmat. There are many different ways to do it, but I'll be giving you the basic structure. People do it differently, so if you feel comfortable in a different way, I'll try to go through all the different ways that is possible. Next I'll be talking about the basics of a turn, so the start of your turn, the mid part of your turn, the end part of your turn. Just to give you the basics of what you need. When it comes to me making these type of videos, I will be going through everything in more detail later on, but for now, only thing you need to know is that a playmat is to keep your cards safe, and when you play the game there is different ways you can place your cards so that other people know what you're doing, and this is the easiest I found structure to keep your playmat kind of nice and neat. If I am talking in the video and there is something you don't understand, it will be explained fully in more detail, because later on I am planning on doing a kind of a full step-by-step breakdown of someone's turn. Let's first start off with the playmat itself. So when it comes to a playmat itself, it's usually kind of like a mouse mat but bigger. You can get them on Ultra Pro, which is a really good website. They make really good designs. A lot of people that have playmats have usually art they like of their favorite card or other arts you can get. There is also, you can get them on Amazon and eBay. I've got mine from different places. A lot of mine have been from Amazon. So for example, I have one here of an Ultra Pro playmat. You can see here the art on it. It is Time Warp from Mystical Archive, and that's one of my favorite cards. So when it comes to the playmat itself, when you play it down, many different people play it in different ways. So I will be going through step by step where most people will put their stuff. I will also give variations that I know. If there is ones I don't know that you feel more comfortable with, you can do that. It's not kind of the end all, like if you don't like it there, you can move it somewhere else. As long as all the cards are readable, people don't really mind. So for now, the main thing you need to know is card types. I will be going through them individually one by one in later videos, but for now, here is an example of a card and where you should find the card type. It will say it just under the art image, but over the text box in a small thin bar. So the first part I will be talking about is your deck. So when it comes to your deck, there's two ways you can play. You can play it landscape or portrait. Personally, I prefer it portrait because you get to, if you are looking at the top card or drawing, I find it easier to slide it so no one can see when it goes into my hand. If you are left-handed, it's easier to put it on the left. If you are right-handed, put it on the right, but I usually put it here. The deck is supposed to be played upside down, so if you do have it sleeved, you will see the color of the sleeve on top. If not, you will see the back of the Magic card. If you have already bought any form of Magic cards, you know what the back should look like. The second thing would be your commander. I personally place it just above the deck itself, so people can see it. There's many other places you can put it. You can put it, most people try and put them in the center of the table so everyone can see what the commander is, but then some people put it just above their deck. The third option I've seen that people do is they will slot it kind of halfway into their deck so it is easier to pull out if they are playing a commander that they play a lot, because sometimes if you just place it flat on the mats, it is kind of difficult to get up unless you have nails, or some people will slide a card underneath to lift it. But there are three different ways you can do it. You can put it just above your commander deck, you put it at the center of the table that everyone can see, or you can slot it into the deck itself. The next section I'll be talking about is your graveyard and exile. For the people that don't know, your graveyard is if a creature dies or if you've used a spell that you put it in your graveyard. Exile means it is exiled from the game. There is only one of two ways I've seen people use where they put the cards. One is just below the deck, where some people put their cards landscape for exile and portrait for graveyard, or you get some people that put them side by side. So some people will put the graveyard underneath the deck, and then to the right or left of that, depending if you're right or left-handed, will put their exile pile next to it. There are cards in Magic the Gathering that take stuff from your graveyard and put it on the hand or field, so that's why it's good to separate the two. And there are some cards that do it from Exile, but they are kind of rare. The next section I will be talking about is the lands. Lands are the most necessary part of Magic because you cannot play cards without playing lands. However, there are two ways I've seen people play lands. One is just in the center at the bottom of the mat, and if you have, like, we'll say for example 5 of the same lands, like 5 islands or 5 forests, people usually stack them kind of on top of each other but slightly out, so you see the top of it in stacks of 5. Some people do it stacks of 3, so it's just easier to kind of, instead of having them all one by one, if you're like, I need 10 mana, you just tap the 2 stacks. There are many different types of lands that do different things, but for now you just need to know what a land is and where to put it. Some people that play years and years ago, originally the game was made that lands are played on top in the center, but after, I don't know when it changed. I've never personally seen anyone put lands on top, but in fairness, it's kind of a really old rule of how Magic used to be played. But if you feel comfortable that way, you can do it. So the next thing I'll be talking about is creatures. Creatures are placed above the lands in the center because creatures is kind of usually when you play kind of the main thing you play, so they need the most room other than lands, and they're usually played above because it's easier to kind of tap everything that's in the center of your playmat. Creatures used to be played at the bottom because lands used to play at the top, but a few years ago, I don't know when, it switched, as I said when I was talking about lands. So creatures are usually placed in the center top, and people kind of split them out in different ways. Personally, I usually do whatever the main focus is stays in the middle, and if like there are certain cards that I don't want to attack or I need them for other purposes, usually stay on the sides of the center, if that makes sense. This is where things get more complicated because the next ones are enchantments, and there's different versions of enchantments. So a lot of enchantments usually just stay there and kind of just do kind of like a static ability, which means they kind of just do one thing that's constantly going or is constantly there. Here is a few examples of those cards. So I usually put them to the top left because they just kind of stay in the corner. They don't do much, you don't have to tap them. However, there is other enchantments that enchant your creatures. Here are a few examples of them. So there's a few enchantments that enchant opponent's creatures or enchant the opponent themselves. So usually with those different types of enchantments, you place them somewhere else. So if you are enchanting one of your creatures, you usually place it underneath but have the text box visible. Some people that have played Magic for a long time and know the cards just by name slide it up so you just see the name. If you are enchanting a opponent's creature or an opponent themselves, it depends what the enchantment does. If you're giving it like a boost, you can enchant it underneath, so like these cards here. But there's enchantments that exile stuff and stuff like that where people usually put it on top and then put it to the side. And then usually if you are enchanting an opponent, you usually put it on top or above the playmat or in where they play their enchantments. It's different for each player, so if you are enchanting a player, it's easy to kind of hand them the card and let them place it where it's visible for all of the players to see. And then lastly, there's artifacts. Artifacts is kind of like enchantments where it's kind of a bit complicated because there is, for the basics, there are 3 types of artifacts that you'll be mainly using. So personally, I will give my version of where I put them, and then I will give you examples, and hopefully this helps. If you have any comments underneath, let me know and I will make a small video, or I will just reply with a comment. And I will definitely be going through each of these step by step. So when it comes to artifacts, there's 3 main types that most people will use in Magic. There's many more, and I will get onto talking about them in later videos, but for now you just need to know the ones that tap for mana. Here are an example. I usually put them on the other side of the lands, so away from the graveyard when they tap for mana, but they're at kind of the bottom half of the map. If an artifact is kind of more of an enchantment, like for example these here, I will put them in the box with the enchantments because they just do a static effect, so I leave them with the enchantments. And then there is enchantment creatures that usually go with the creatures themselves. So that's why artifacts are a bit artifacts and enchantments are kind of a bit more difficult to place them on a map because there's different artifacts and different enchantments. Like some people, and I do this myself personally, will have a creature that they only want it to stay there because of the static of the creature, and they will put it right next to where all the enchantments are, even though that creature is just a creature, not an enchantment creature. So hopefully now you know the basics of where everything goes on your mat or table. If you have any questions, please let me know and I will answer them the best I can. And next we'll be talking about taking your turn itself, where it comes in 3 easy steps for the basics. There is a lot of kind of sub things in between taking your turn, which I will be going in a later video. But for now, the basics is starting your turn, the main crux of your turn, and then ending your turn. So the first one is starting your turn. It comes in 3 easy steps: untap, upkeep, and draw. Untapping means when you've played your lands and used them, you usually tap them, or if you attack with creatures, other than if it says so, you tap the creatures too. So on your up-tap step, you untap all your lands and you untap all your creatures unless there is a card saying you cannot, or there's other rules saying you cannot, but usually if you can untap them, you untap them at this step. Next is your upkeep, where if there are many cards in Magic the Gathering that say at the beginning of your turn, and here are a few examples of them, that this is when they activate. So depending what it says on the card, this is when you do what it says on the card, because this is when everything kind of upkeeps. And then draw is where you draw to officially start your turn, because on each of your turns you draw the top card to your library and it goes to your hand. After that is your actual main turn. It can be broken down to something that I call the MCM. Your main phase 1, your combat, and then your main phase 2. So your main phase 1 is where you get to play your spells, so your creatures, your land per turn, unless specific otherwise, your artifacts. This is where you can take the main part of your turn. Next after that is combat. This is where you go, I am attacking with these creatures. If they can attack, when you play something, it usually has summoning sickness, so it can attack till the next turn. But there's again other ways around all of these. This is just the basic of combat. So you usually go, I want to attack with these creatures that I played last turn, or if they have a keyword called haste, which I'll get into in another video, I then attack by tapping them to clarify that they are attacking, and then whoever you are attacking chooses if they want to block or not. The third one is your main phase 2, where you get to pretty much do the exact same thing as main phase 1. When it comes to different decks and how you play them, it depends if you want to play your stuff after or before combat. That is kind of more of a complicated thing to talk about, which I will do in a later video. But for now, you just need to know you have a main phase 1, where you get to do what you want if you can, then combat, and then main phase 2. Then after that is your end step. And your end step is usually comes in 2 sections. If a card says at the end of your turn, do blank, you do blank. And then no matter what, this is always at the very end, and it's your discard step. So in Magic, you have a hand size of 7, unless otherwise. There is a few cards that say if you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, that's a completely different matter. But if you have more than 7 cards in your hand, you have to take one of the cards and put them in the graveyard, or take cards over how many cards you have over 7 and put them in, and you get to choose, which is the good thing. That is the very end step. So if you have a card that says on your end step, draw a card, and that makes you draw your 8th card, you still have to get rid of 1. So now you know the basics of where your cards go, what a playmat is, sleeves, and how to take your first turn. Now don't worry if a lot of this didn't make sense or it sounds confusing. I will go over them in later videos. If you have any comments, I will try my best to let you know. But for now, you can help this series out so I can keep growing and keep doing more classes by subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram. I will help in any way I possibly can. I love this game and I want more people to grow and play. So just let me know in the comments down below and I'll help as much as possible. But the only way I can do that is if you help me in return by helping my page grow. So now this is the end of class 2. Next video I will be going on to the basic card types. So everything I mentioned today about artifacts, lands, enchantments and stuff, I'll be going into more detail, more different versions of them, and I will be giving kind of different versions of different cards that do different things. So it's kind of now only thing you need to know what an artifact and a land is. I will be giving you a kind of a bigger, broader one of them in the next video. So thank you, and I will see you in the next video.